Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 82 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. This week we're speaking with Kyle Mann, the editor-in-chief of the Babylon Bee. If you've read any of their stories or even seen their tweets, you know it's the best source of satire around, bar none. Can't wait to talk to him. This week's show is sponsored by Netflix, home of the best TV shows around and movies so mediocre you'll stop streaming midway through. Before we begin, I wanted to talk about Kate McKinnon. The Saturday Night Live star is now a TV and movie actress. And on the latter front, well, she hasn't really gotten that whole Chevy Chase, Bill Murray fame down pat. She's not a huge movie star yet, not an A-lister. And we don't know if it's going to happen or not. She's certainly a talented actress. I think she brings out the best in whatever she does. But there's a new sense that, well, maybe Hollywood is doing her wrong. Now, she almost became a big movie star with Ghostbusters. I mean, what could be a bigger project? But we all know what happened there. Now she's in The Spy Who Dumped Me, a movie with tepid box office predictions and tepid reviews. So the whole new media meme I'm seeing is, why can't Hollywood give her a good comedy? What's going on? Why is Hollywood failing her? You know, it's not a terrible question, but the emphasis is on the wrong place. Why can't Hollywood make a good comedy, period? Flop after flop after flop. Woke after woke after woke. The modern comedy's in a creative tailspin. The only funny movies these days have people in tights. Ant-Man and the Wasp is funnier than any comedy, I should say, that I've seen in maybe the last 2 or 3 years. I think you could say the same about Deadpool 2, Thor Ragnarok. So why should McKinnon be treated any differently? They just don't make him like they used to, and that's a real shame. We've already seen rom-coms essentially go away. Will comedies be next? You know, our PC culture certainly is partly to blame here. I also credit the reliance on F-bombs in a script as part of the problem, too. You don't have to make every comedy R-rated. You don't have to make them littered with profanity. I'm no prude, but F-bombs aren't funny by themselves. They have to be craftily inserted into the story, into the screenplay. Then they might draw a laugh or two. Just saying them randomly? Nah, not funny at all. I think another part of the problem here is that a lot of the better comedy writers are probably flocking to television. They have more creative freedom, there's less pressure. The movie game is just changing so rapidly, relying on sequels and franchises. There's not enough room for a creative, out-of-bounds, wacky comedy. There's too many restrictions placed on it, from those PC rules to other things as well. Is this going to test market well? Is it a 4-quadrant movie? Well, it's funny. Is that enough? Well, maybe it isn't enough. Another reason why I think we're seeing so few really great comedies out there. You know, recently on Twitter, I went back and forth with a whole bunch of people talking about Blazing Saddles. The common refrain is, you can't make it today, you can't get close to it. You know, it's absolutely right. And if there's a young Mel Brooks out there, why in the world would he or she go into movies? Maybe streaming, maybe television, maybe something else. But boy, movie comedies, I would stay far, far away from that. Especially if I'm an eccentric soul, I've got a kind of classic spirit to me. I just think you would really be poorly served by films today. So let's not cry for Kate McKinnon. She's still getting those SNL checks, and she's going to pick up a project or two from now on, I think, or at least the next few years. Maybe one will click, maybe one will not. I don't know. It's not her fault that Hollywood can keep its talented comics flush with funny movie scripts. But maybe she should write one of her own.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
Here's a celebrity tweet of the week. This week's winner is Piper Perabo, an actress so committed to the resistance, her Twitter bio doesn't even mention the fact that she's an actress. That's pretty cool, right? She's also part of the liberal movement that had to discredit Judge Brett Kavanaugh at all costs. because it's totally a nonpartisan thing. Here's her tweet. All 100 senators and the millions of people in America they represent need to see Brett Kavanaugh's full record so they can make an informed decision. This is not the time for a partisan double standard. Too much is at stake. Hashtag release the records. Hashtag what are they hiding? Yeah, a freakishly qualified judge has so many dirty secrets, they'll never be revealed.
You're listening to my daddy's podcast. Hey, still ate sandwiches with the crust cut off.
My hit tip of the week is Detectorists. What? What a terrible title. And it sounds even worse. Just wait. It's a British TV show streaming on Netflix starring Toby Jones and Mackenzie Crook as metal detector enthusiasts and best friends. Are you bored yet? I don't blame you. It sounds blah, blah, bland. But it's really quite a good character study with a steady sense of whimsy. Now, I'm only 2 episodes in, so I'm kind of jumping the gun here a little bit, but I have a really good feeling about it. Plus, a good friend of mine said, hey, this is a show you need to check out, and so far he's right as rain. What I love about Detectorists is the main characters seem like sad sacks. They seem like the kind of guys you want to just laugh at and not with. But it doesn't really work that way. They kind of have a quiet dignity about them, about what they do. They take their work very seriously, and you will too. It's also a hoot because some of the supporting characters are just so eccentric. Weird, creepy, funny, odd, bizarre, but not like in that whole Napoleon Dynamite bizarre. They're based in reality for sure, but they're just a little bit off-kilter and makes the main characters pop even more. Detectorists has 2 seasons right now on Netflix. I really recommend it. Now let's get to this week's HitCast interview. If you're not reading the Babylon Bee, you're missing the very best political satire around, period. Oh, and the site also pokes fun at Christianity in a way that you can tell comes from a place of affection. That really matters when it comes to comedy. The site's editor-in-chief is Kyle Mann. He's a fellow who didn't set out to shame every late-night comic around. He just does it all the same with his biting humor and ability to mock both sides. How cool is that? Kyle is also the co-author of How to Be a Perfect Christian, a mock guide that many people of faith will enjoy, and maybe a few will get a little bit angry about. Satire often works best when it leaves a mark. That's what Kyle does with regularity. Here's my chat with the Babylon Bees, Kyle Mann. Well, Kyle, thank you for joining the HitCast. I'm always curious how people get involved with their current professions. I love to ask this of comedians in particular, but you have a very specific skill set and a very specific gig. I was kind of curious, you can maybe give us kind of the quick bio sketch of how do you get to where you are right now? I don't think people wake up and say, I want to do Christian satire with a dollop of political conversations. How did you get here?
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. I was actually in the construction industry for like 10 years on the supply side. Sorry. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I sold construction materials for 10 years, and you know, I wrote a little bit on the side for some other sites, a lot of video games, a lot of video game writing, other kinds of writing, but not a ton. And it was just something I did for fun on the side. Adam Ford, who founded the Babylon Bee, announced that he was starting the site in March of 2016, and kind of asked for submissions. So I sent in a bunch of articles. It was just something that really resonated with me, what he was trying to do, because there wasn't really a lot of that kind of dry humor out there in the Christian world. So I started submitting articles, and he and I really kind of had a very similar sense of humor, worldview. It just we really clicked in terms of what we wanted a good Christian satire site to be. So I was just writing on the side, as I was working full time in construction, and as I could, I was sending stuff in, and pretty quick I became kind of the head writer over there at the Babylon Bee. And then just recently, a few months ago, I quit my construction job and went full time, and I'm now the editor-in-chief of the website.
It's amazing. You mentioned 2016. I run my own site, Hollywood in Toto. It takes a while to get traction, to kind of get people interested in you. In just 2 years, it's kind of a remarkable how far the Babylon Bee, has come. I was kind of curious, when you first start writing and you're trying to be funny, I feel like writing funny is really hard. Was there kind of a moment where you thought, I can do this, or maybe you got validation from different people or different readers where you thought, you know what, not only can I try to be funny, but it's working. I mean, I think that's sort of an odd transition because, like I said, it's really hard.
Yeah, I mean, comedy or satire, whatever we do, is kind of, even now I write an article and I think it's hilarious, and you publish it and it doesn't get that much traction. It just happens. It's comedy is such a, it's so intangible. You can analyze the parts of a joke and you can say, this is how you have to do it, or it has to include surprise or timing, and all these elements you can break down, but ultimately it just comes down to this intangible element. It's almost you know it when you see it, but you can't really break down what's funny and what's not. So I write articles because I think they're funny, or being satire, I think they're important. I'll write something that I know, or I guess probably won't do that well, in terms of social media reach and viral content. I'll write things that I know that aren't going to do all that well just because I think they're important to write, and I think they're important to get out there. But yeah, when I first started writing, it was like, I write this thing and it's like, I think this is funny. And then you see a lot of people sharing it and you're like, wow, other people thought it was funny too. So that's cool. But I think it's important, not to write stuff because you think it's going to go viral or because you think it's going to get that far reach. You got to write something because you think it's good.
Yeah. Trust your gut. I want to discuss your new book, How to Be a Perfect Christian. Going through the pages of it, I'm thinking you're stepping on some toes here, but that's not exactly unexpected or unexplored territory for you. What would you say is the book's bigger meaning from your perspective? I mean, obviously there's lots of jokes there. It's funny. It's cutting. It makes a lot of different sort of smaller points, but what's the big picture here from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, you say it's cutting, and that's what satire does, is it cuts, and it, that's what we wanted to do, is to use satire as a tool to cut away, so many of these cultural assumptions that we have about Christianity, where you might think your church tradition does things the right way, or I think my church tradition does things the right way. And we wanted to kind of examine and say, well, is there a biblical approach to Christianity that maybe transcends all of our different, assumptions about how to practice our faith? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I grew up in a big church, and for a long time, my assumption was, if a church was small or didn't have the full, rock band experience and for worship on Sunday morning, that, they were doing something wrong or it wasn't effective ministry, and so and then eventually, I left that church, started going to smaller churches, and then even those churches, though, you see people kind of have this, we're doing things the right way, uh-huh. and so we kind of wanted to cut that away and just expose some of the assumptions that we have about Christianity.
Yeah. The new book, Consumerism, takes it on the chin a time or two. This may sound like an obvious question, but can you dig a little bit deeper into that, what your concerns are and how that sort of weaves into faith culture at this point?
Yeah, as far as consumerism, I think the first few chapters especially, we hit on that pretty hard because, we kind of write it as this guide, for shopping for a church. And I mean, that in itself is like, why are we shopping for churches? That's not really, but then in the same time, like right now, I just moved to a new area and I am shopping for a church, in a way that's, it's a way to look at it, but you have to kind of ask yourself, like, am I looking for something that is only going to, cater to me, or is it something where I look for a place where I can serve, or I look for a place where God's going to speak to me and where God can use me, So, consumerism is such a integral part of the American mindset that it's kind of infiltrated the church, and that we look for everything as an experience or, as something like that.
Yeah. At the Babylon Bee, you cover politics and you cover religion. What gets you the most heat, and are there more specific sort of themes within those themes that get the most outrage or angry tweets or commentary?
You'd be surprised. Like, there's this whole stereotype that, liberals are thin-skinned and, politically, if you're politically to the left, you're you can't take a joke, and that holds true sometimes. But then also we see on the other side, if we write something about Donald Trump, and you poke fun at Donald Trump, even something a little lighter where we're not really going in for the kill, but we're just doing something silly, we get so many angry comments about that. I think we get more emails and comments saying like, I'm going to unfollow you, from conservative people who are upset that, we did something funny about the president. And it's really interesting that you see that. But you do see it from all sides. It doesn't matter what it is. No matter what we write about, it's somebody's sacred cow.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I was growing up, the Last Temptation of Christ got a lot of controversy. They were picketing. I feel like in recent years there have been other films that have been really tough on the church in a variety of ways, and they haven't inspired that, at least from my sort of pop cultural lens. Do you think that Christians are getting a thicker skin when it comes to either satire or humor or maybe interpretation, or maybe are Christians sort of getting into the whole outrage mob thing like everyone else?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. You definitely don't see that whole moral majority and all that where people were going out and picketing. And it may be just because the way that we organize has changed from, people turning on the TV and flipping over to TBN and you see what the latest, conservative Christian leader is talking about. And then that word of mouth kind of spreads through all the churches and stuff. When I was growing up, it was Dungeons and Dragons, that was the culprit. And, I don't know, I guess people still probably have their hangups about stuff like that, but maybe it's just the way that we mobilize isn't really like go out and picket stuff anymore. Now it's people just complain about it on the internet or something.
That's right. They get out of their system. We're speaking with Kyle Mann, editor-in-chief of the Babylon Bee and co-author of the new book, How to Be a Perfect Christian. I want to read a recent Babylon Bee headline. To me, it's really emblematic of what your site does. It says, Twitter CEO apologizes for allowing conservatives on the platform in the first place. Now, it's funny, and the story's funny, but I'm thinking you will not see that perspective from 98.2% of your fellow comedians out there. Is there a sense of freedom that there's a whole untapped realm? I mean, I would think that it's such right material. It's like you take all the jokes in the world, you cut them in half, and you say, these are off limits. But then you just kind of walk in with your Babylon B side and say, you know what, I'm going to tackle it. Well, talk about that. Is it exciting? Is it frustrating? Is it sort of there? You have more ideas and you can actually write stories about? What's it like for you?
Yeah, it definitely was a whole untapped realm. Not that we only write satire from the right, from the right's perspective, but it's something where nobody else was doing that kind of balanced satire where, we do the post about the Twitter thing, and then the next post is attacking Donald Trump or something, that he said or whatever. And it definitely was freeing in that we our comedy didn't have to be constrained, to one viewpoint. It didn't have to be, we are the conservative version of The Onion, or we only write satire from this perspective. So, it's definitely freeing in that sense. And yeah, you really don't see a lot of people going out there and doing, comedy from more, at least not from a super liberal perspective.
Gotcha. This may be kind of a hacky question, but are there lines you don't cross with the site's humor, areas you kind of tiptoe around? I mean, I often comedians say that anything goes. You can make a rape joke funny if you tell it the right way, is sort of the conventional wisdom. But from your perspective, are there sort of boundaries that you and your colleagues kind of put in place? And basically, if we do write a piece about something that's controversial, it's, the message that you are trying to get across and the seriousness with which you write the satire has to be taken into account. So if you do something really flippant about something that people take really seriously, like abortion or something like that, it's going to come across wrong. It's going to come across like
like you think abortion's funny or you think abortion's lighthearted. Mm-hmm. But we do write satire about stuff like that. We do write satire about abortion, and it's really powerful. We've published some pieces that have had a pretty big impact, that have been shared far and wide. But it's because we tell it with the appropriate seriousness, with the appropriate gravity, so yeah, I mean, there are lines, especially as Christians, we have to be careful. We don't want to come across, like it's blasphemy or something. Like it's hard. You don't want to tell something from Jesus's perspective, and you don't want to, you don't, I don't know. We typically don't want to bring God into a joke too much to where it's like, well, we're putting words in God's mouth or we're making God look silly, mm-hmm. But obviously a lot of our satire is going to be adjacent to that. So there's definitely a line where we have to be careful. Yeah.
This kind of piggybacks on something we were just talking about, but I think I read an interview where you said you can't have great satire if you're not hitting both sides. And I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of conservatives adore South Park, because they hit both sides. They hit it, without mercy, but I think they're equal opportunity offenders. Where, as a comic writer, you look at Colbert and Kimmel and Noah and a lot of prominent names, a lot of talented people. They rarely poke the other side. I think Noah maybe does it the best, and he does it sporadically. What's your take on what they're doing in the age of Trump? Because I have my own take on it, and I talk about it and write about it a lot. But from your perspective, how do you? I mean, do you condemn them? Do you wish they did different things? How would you kind of assess what they're up to?
Well, I mean, it's important to have that kind of satire. It's important to have satire about Trump and about, people. I don't know. They always try to set up this line like you have to write satire about people in power, or it's not real satire. But I don't, that line doesn't really exist. And I don't really see things in terms of this power dynamic where you have to write about one particular group and not another. My favorite satire is always written by people who, either understand what they're writing about, or have a great respect for it. I can write about the church, and I can write satire about the church because I love the church. I can write satire about the scriptures and about the way that people look at it because I have a great respect for the scriptures. And I think a lot of times when you see people like the people you mentioned, or you see people like The Onion who are writing about when they do a topic about faith or about the church, it just comes across as so cynical, mm-hmm. and so mean-spirited that, I'll read some of their pieces when they do a piece on the church, and I'm like, this person has never been to church in their life. Like, you can just tell when you read it, and so I think that's really important to be able to satirize your own positions, as well as other people's.
Yeah, I think you can tell that with some of the humor, especially the President Trump and Alec Baldwin. I think his sort of anger is so fused to the character. It's something missing, whereas maybe like a Dana Carvey with George Bush, the elder, it had a different feel to it. I know your site's had some sort of struggles with Facebook, and I was kind of curious what your Facebook relationship status is now. Are you guys still kind of bumping heads, or is it? And I mean, the whole fake news thing just seems silly when it comes to The Onion, Babylon Bee, and other sites, but it is what it is. What's going on there? I mean, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing battle. We had that one really big fallout where they kind of said we were publishing fake news, and they warned us against publishing fake news. And it's like, well, dude, this is satire. This isn't, and they kind of claimed that was a bug or whatever, but we definitely see reduced reach. You see a piece that should have done well, or a piece that did well a couple years ago, and you repost it, and it's like, it just totally dies. Or you'll see Facebook, you'll see them put like if Snopes fact checked an article, they'll put it right underneath it, mm-hmm. and then nobody will click on the article, and then they're hiding it from everybody because it's like, well, you shared something that Snopes disproved. Mm-hmm. So it's an ongoing struggle, and it's going to be a big battle going forward, not only for us, not only for conservative pages, but you're going to see it for a lot of satire, comedy. A lot of people are fighting against this.
I mean, to me, it seems bizarre that we're even having this discussion about satire. But I guess in a way you could say that, to me, the turning point was with Sarah Palin and Tina Fey. When Tina Fey did that great impression, it really rocked the kind of the culture in a way where people just saw Governor Palin in a different light, a very negative light. And I think the comedian said, wait a minute, we've got real power here. And what's your take on that? I mean, do you think that maybe comedians do they think they have too much power, or maybe they do have as much power as they think they do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends on who we're talking about, but yeah, I definitely think that people's perception can be influenced, positively or negatively by the way that they're portrayed in comedy and satire. So that's something we have to be careful about. Are we just pushing a stereotype that's not true, or are we trying to influence and change the conversation about somebody?
Yeah. How do you think your comedy has improved since the last 2 or 3? I mean, it's a pretty short period of time you've been working, and now it's full time for the Babylon Bee. But do you think that you're more perceptive? Is it harder to come up with punchline? I mean, where do you kind of assess yourself as far as a creative evolution?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, you have a lot of low-hanging fruit that nobody has done satire on, and there were all these topics that people in the church have thought about and talked about and written about for years. As far as the way we worship and as far as theology, and people weren't doing dry satire like we wanted to do about that stuff. So you had stuff where the punchlines were easy and they became pretty easily to us, so that they were obvious almost. So now it's more, being creative, where you say, okay, well, here's a topic we haven't hit yet. What's a way we can approach this? Or you say, here's something that we already talked about a while back, but we've got a different angle on it now. So it's definitely something where you're being stretched more and more with how you approach it. I don't know. I think we've improved. We brought on a guy who does Photoshops. Mm-hmm. and does them really well because before, me and Adam are just, we just learned, taught Photoshop to ourselves and started using it, and we came up with some pretty elaborate stuff through that. But mm-hmm. but we brought on a guy who does that, and visual aspects are such an important part of comedy that's been really good for us. But yeah, I think ultimately it's just trying to be more creative and think outside the box in terms of how do we approach a particular topic. Gotcha.
When you think, I've been kind of writing about and thinking a lot about the James Gunn situation, the Guardians of the Galaxy director who lost his job based on some kind of unfunny tweets that talked about pedophilia. He's apologized. He lost his gig. Now they're trying to get the gig back. A lot of conservatives are saying, yeah, we hate this, but these are the new rules. You got to feel pain on both sides before we get back to that point in our culture where a joke is a joke and we move on. What's your take on this whole situation? Is that a fair response? I mean, I feel kind of conflicted at times, but I also think that things won't change unless both sides do feel the sting of the PC police. What's your general sense there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, and we've done a couple of pieces on it. Some a little more lighthearted, and some kind of speaking to this idea that you can't say anything anymore without thinking about, what's my career going to look like in 10 years? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's definitely frightening to think about, because I start going back and saying, did I say anything? I'm sure I've made a bad joke before, and so we think about that a lot. And yeah, I guess for me, I say that, if somebody said something 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and it's obvious that it was a joke, like, I don't know. I guess for me, I'm thinking like, all right, well, does this have any bearing on who they are as a person now? And then I think one of my fellow writers pitched an idea for that James Gunn situation, like, the nation wonders if, I don't remember the exact wording, but it's like, the nation wonders if James Gunn has the moral clarity to direct a talking raccoon. It's like, is this guy, is he trying to be a pastor, or like, I don't know. It's interesting, and that there's kind of a selective outrage about who we're mad about now, depending on what tweets we find. Yeah, it's an interesting time. Generally speaking, are you optimistic that the culture may be evolving in a more open way, or do you think that we're going to kind of head deeper down this path where the you got to be careful what you say, because it could be your last Twitter statement? Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be a tipping point. There has to be a breaking point. Maybe it's the James Gunn thing. Maybe it's going to take more, liberals being called out, before people are like, okay, before people that are heading up these mobs are like thinking about it and saying maybe this is self-destructive. I don't know. There's got to be a tipping point there somewhere.
Yeah, I hope it is. And maybe this could be it, but we shall see. Well, Kyle, thanks again for joining the HiTcast. Please visit babylonb.com for simply the best political and cultural satire around. It's really great stuff. I just my jaw drops when I check out my Twitter feed and I follow you guys, and it's just really good material. So keep it up. And also, please check out How to Be a Perfect Christian, the site's premier book. Is that available now or coming soon? What's the drop date on that?
Yeah, it's available now. Amazon, anywhere books are sold, really.
Great. Well, on the show notes page at hollywoodintoto.com, you can find the link to that. Kyle, thanks so much. You do great work, and I'm really proud to have you on the show and spread the good word. You don't need it, but I'm happy to shout it to the rooftops.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out hollywoodintoto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at hollywoodintoto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.